Hi, my name's John, and I'd just like to take you through 10 different connection options that we can connect to different data sources using the Data Warehouse Cloud. So Data Warehouse Cloud just requires individuals to operate in a space, which allows teams to work in and perform a great case of isolability. Once we have access to a space, we are then able to bring in all the different data sources and then easily build them together using the modeling tools, and then from there visualizing them using the story builder capability. So in this session I'm going to focus purely on integrating different data sources, and I'm going to cover off 10 in total. So let's get started. So what I'm interested in is going to my spaces. I've got a space here that is actually empty at the moment, so I'm assigned to it. And there's no connections or no other configuration in that space. So what I'm interested in doing is creating a range of different connections. So for those connections, if they're publicly accessible, we typically use a DP agent, which allows that to connect through to the Data Warehouse Cloud. If it's not publicly accessible, we use an agent specifically on that box that can connect to it, then makes it publicly accessible. So I've got an S4 instance here that's behind and uses an internal name, so we use an agent to connect from that box to the Data Warehouse Cloud, and similarly for the BW4 instance as well. So these are the two agents I'll use for these specific environments. The rest of them will use a public DP agent, and that's it. So from the space perspective, in my demo space I've got here, I'll start creating some connections. The first one I'll do is the SAP ECC, so connecting on that. So this is a publicly accessible server, so we can use the public agent, and it's just available on an IP address, which the client is 001, system, this is IP, and the system number is 00. So from there, I've got a user, UWC user, and welcome content. So that's the first connection done, and from there I can just test it using that configuration. It's valid, and I'll go through and add the next one. So S4. So S4 on-premise server. So I'll call that my second one, S4 to S4. So again, that's using the specific S4 DP agent, and what I'm able to do now is use the internal name that DP agent recognizes. So I can connect to internal systems just as I would as well. So I don't need that, system that, and the username. Okay, and that's the S4 connection. So literally in a matter of not long at all, I'm able to log in there and create the connection, validate it, and then continue. So also in my instance I've got a BW instance which I want to connect to, so using the ABAP connection, 3 BW, it's a BW4 instance, again using the BW specific agent behind the firewall. So the location of that one, and the username and password. So that's now connected. So we've got an ECC, an S4, and a BW4 instance. Just validating the BW4 instance, that's fine. And now what I could do is maybe move on to some other types of databases. So as part of the adapters, we've got a range of them here. So we've got a SQL Server capability as well. So I've actually got a SQL Server instance running on Azure. So here we can see it's a sample generic database, but we've got the host name and obviously the details that go around with that as well. I actually use a serverless one, which actually does shut down after an hour, but it restarts as soon as it gets called. So that's easily connected to using the SQL Server connector, and it could be an Azure or it could be an on-prem instance. Just for the demo purposes, I'll use that Azure instance. So this is number 4, MSSQL. Okay, so that can use the standard agent. Host name, standard port of a SQL Server database, the database name which you saw, Adventure. The latest version is fine, and that is, and then the password. Okay, so now we've got SQL Server. Test that. Okay, and in addition to that, we'll continue through the other connection types that we have. So we've also got the Oracle instance here. So this is number 5. So I've just got this connected to an Oracle instance running on. What's it running on? It's running on Amazon. So it's just a simple XE database, the free version of Oracle. So that's running on an XE instance, 12c version. I've opened up the HR schema and the password. So again, testing. It could be a lower version of Oracle as well, not the latest version, but that connection is the right button. Okay, so now we've got a connection to the Oracle instance as well. Okay, so what I might do now is move on to a HANA instance. So we've got an SAP HANA native one. So what I'll do is connect to a HANA OnPrem initially, and very simply using that same agent, connecting to the HANA server. This is also public accessible, so I don't need an agent, and I can just recognize the host name, not access validating certificate, and just the username and password. So again, very quick and easy to add a HANA instance, connecting that to the Data Warehouse Cloud, and similarly to that, I'll actually add a HANA Cloud instance. So the latest and greatest version of HANA in the cloud. So HANA Cloud there. So for that, I won't show you the HANA Cloud console, but it has an IP address running on 443, and I won't actually validate the certificate for that is either, and the username and password. So now quickly and easily again connected to the HANA Cloud as an example here. Okay. Now we're getting into some of the more diverse stuff. an ODATA connection. So this ODATA, which could be, in my case, I'm going to use a SuccessFactors environment. So SuccessFactors has a range of all of its data being exposed via an ODATA capability, and it simply exposes different at an endpoint as a URL using the basic authentication. So you would have a username and password for your company, and then obviously a password as well. So I'll create that connection, and that's number 8. So now I've done 8 different connections. If I test the SuccessFactors one, that comes up now, and showing you that obviously the data's connection is valid as well. So there's 8 connections using this method. We've also got the OpenSQL capability here as well. So as number 9, we'll use the OpenSQL option, and what that does is then exposes a SQL name endpoint, so that we can populate the data within the Data Warehouse Cloud via data services or manually as well. So this is the SQL name, the host name, the username, the port, and the password. So from my perspective here, what I can do is grab that host name, get it into a let me just create a new connection. So it's a HANA connection. I'm just using dbeaver here as an OpenSQL capability, just so we can connect to the HANA Data Warehouse Cloud instance. Is under driver properties to make sure encrypt is set to true, being an encrypted connection. So from here I can open up the connection. So that's the one that I just created around demo 9, OpenSQL connectors. So there's no objects in there yet. What I could do is load an object into it. So I've actually got another, I might just use this other HANA Cloud instance. So I've got a set of tables here, maybe a sales order table. Export the data and actually just copy it straight into the Data Warehouse Cloud instance. So by setting the target instance being that instance that I've just created there from the Data Warehouse Cloud, and you can't actually do that at the top level. Demo, so specifying the schema of the Data Warehouse Cloud, and then what that will do is copy it from the HANA Cloud instance and then load that through into the Data Warehouse Cloud. So that's just going to create that as a new object. So this is just some of the functionality out of dbeaver, but it's just quick and easy to show you. Obviously we've copied data now, and it's available directly in here now within the Open Schema environment under number 9. So finally, what I'll also do is show you the HDI connector, which is where you've got HANA objects that you've exported as HDI containers, and you've deployed them into the same Cloud Foundry environment as the Data Warehouse Cloud environment that you use. So from there, once it's deployed to the same Cloud Foundry environment, it also needs to be deployed to the same, deployed to the same space. And you can see here that in my example, you just need to make sure that your project settings is pointing to the same Cloud Foundry environment endpoint, and it's the same space that you were have defined and registered with the Data Warehousing Cloud team. So from that perspective, it is in the documentation. I'll include it as part of the blog, the link on that. But essentially my HDI container project at the moment is a very simple one, has only one table in it, just as a use case around to showcase it. It's a customer table, but we could have extended it and made it a lot more complex and built a lot more, added a lot more value in the HDI container to then expose that to DataWarehouse Cloud. But what you also need to do is add 2 roles to your project, so DWC consumption role, and specify the tables and objects and how you want to access it, and then also the with grant options role as well. So once those 2 roles have been added to your project, that project has been deployed to the same space that's been defined within the ability that you've enabled through the Data Warehouse Cloud. From there, you're able to then go in and add your HDI containers. So from there, I've got this project here that I've already deployed, and it's as simple as adding it in there directly. So now that I've done all this work around adding in all of these connections, I can easily go into Data Warehouse Cloud and start accessing all of those different sources as connections. So with the connections here, you can see the 1 to 8 under ECC. You can see there's obviously ABAP tables, ABAP by hierarchy, by table name, and then all the different extractors that may exist in the environment. So this ECC instance also has ABAP CDSs and obviously a whole heap of different components. The S4 would obviously have all the S4 type of extractors and components, but obviously a lot more CDS views that are available within this environment as well. You are able to search on the name of your particular object that you're interested in, and then similarly with the BW4 as well. So obviously you've got the ABAP tables and the BW objects as extractors, components there as well. So they all exist under the different folders where you can then access it or search directly for those BW objects. Similarly with the SQL Server, it just takes you to the core objects that user has the privileges in, so you could literally bring your objects straight across as needed as well. So just as an example, the SQL Server object that we're looking at here is you've got a heap of address, customers, product name. It's just your standard AdventureWorks schema, but just as an example, you can literally import them in, and that will import the objects quickly there as well. So that's SQL Server. Moving on to Oracle, again it's a standard Express SQL instance where you've got the HR schema that I've made available with the HR user, and you can do some basic analysis there, or you could do whatever you have with your own data in your Oracle instance. And likewise with HANA, all the different objects that you have exposed within HANA, or the user has access to in HANA, is easily available there, SAP HANA Cloud. And then finally we've got the success factors as the ODATA object. So here we can easily see all of the ODATA endpoints. They're all the success factors data sets that we can then load in and combine and join with each other. So they're the standard connectors. Then we've also got the OpenSQL connector. So this is where I've actually loaded in that one object that I copied into the OpenSQL schema. So it's there and available to be used. And then in addition to that, we've also got the HDI container, which we've connected to from the back end, so we can reuse all those artifacts that you may have built in your own HDI containers. So hopefully that's given you a good insight of how easy it is to get the connections in. And then what I'll do next is I'll actually start using these and building some complex models potentially in the next session. Thank you.